Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. So, I'm Anne Wilson, delighted to be the CEO of Emerge Australia, and I'm your MC for the day, and also the person who'll be saying a few words at the beginning and at the end of this forum. I wish to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to all First Nations people joining us today and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. A very warm welcome to everyone here at Parliament House today and to the more than 200 people registered online. It's so wonderful to have you here with us today. Just a couple of housekeeping rules that I need to pass on to you. Today's forum includes both in-person and recorded presentations, so you'll see those. For our presenters, we'd ask you please to keep to time, and we'll be sounding a gentle chime when there's 2 minutes to go. There it is in your presentation, and Michelle, one of our staff, will be doing that work. So thanks, Michelle. For anyone who needs the restrooms, they're on this level, and feel free to ask any of our Emerge team for directions, or we've got Abby at the back from Australian Parliament House who'll be able to escort you to the restrooms. I think most of you have found the light refreshments, so feel free to grab a drink during the forum, and those refreshments will be available afterwards as well. When leaving this event, please wait to be escorted back to the public area. And of course, this event's going to be live streamed. It is being live streamed as I speak, and a recording will be available in the coming days on the Emerge Australia website. So that's the housekeeping, got that one out of the way quickly. I want to make a special welcome and thank you to our members of Parliament that are here today. I know some of you are already here and others will come. We understand it's a very busy time for you in the House, especially given you've only got a couple of sitting weeks left of this year. So thank you so much for coming and making the time to be here with us and hear about MECFS and hear the voices of people with lived experience. Welcome also to our board chair, Mark Clisby, our ambassador, Lily Schubert, departmental representatives, ministerial advisors, and of course, especially members of our MECFS community, those online and those who are going to be presenting here today. We really thank you for your efforts in coming here today and look forward to hearing from those of you who are in person, and thank you to those who are online as well. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues, other leaders of MECFS organisations who are listening in online, the Neurological Alliance, and those representing associated conditions such as POTS, fibromyalgia, MCAS, EDS, mitochondrial disease, and MS. Whether you're here in person or online, thank you for joining us, and please remember that together we are stronger. So this event marks the second Emerge Australia forum in our roundtable series. The outcome of our first roundtable held in early 24 resulted in the Honourable Mark Butler allocating $1.13 million for the NH&MRC to work with the sector to update and develop new clinical guidelines for MECFS, a landmark decision by the Labor government for which the MECFS community has been advocating for 22 years. That work is thankfully now well underway, and I do note that in the Medical Journal of Australia, against the 2002 clinical guidelines, there has been an update put on that to say that those guidelines are now out of date. And that is progress. Very slow in coming, but it's progress. And we're delighted that the NH and MRC are leading that process and the new guidelines are on their way. Today's Action Forum, From Stigma to Science, Educating for Change, seeks to increase financial investment into ME/CFS by shining a light on this invisible, fluctuating and energy-limiting disease that remains under-recognised and under-prioritised, leaving deep gaps in care and equity for patients. Every Australian deserves access to safe, affordable, high-quality health care. Yet for more than 500,000 Australians living with ME/CFS and long COVID, that promise remains painfully out of reach. A few key facts: 75% of people with ME/CFS are women. And I can see my friend Ross Sinnott over there from the Geelong ME/CFS support group saying, but men also have it too, so I don't want to forget them. 1 in 4 people with ME/CFS are housebound or bedbound, too often met with disbelief instead of care, where stigma has replaced science. The cost to our economy now exceeds $14.5 billion a year. And today we call for evidence-based action to close the gaps in patient care, to educate our clinicians, to have dedicated ME/CFS research and have equitable access to support. To achieve real change, we need targeted investment in 4 key areas. Clinical education for GPs, because without the knowledge and confidence to diagnose, manage and treat ME/CFS, long COVID and associated conditions, patients remain invisible to the healthcare system, and you'll soon hear from our ambassador making comments just like that. Patients being gaslit, patients being sent home with no diagnosis, bedbound for days, weeks, months and years. It's unacceptable and it needs to change. We need expanded support for services, equitable access to telehealth, to in-home support, to psychosocial care, and better system navigation for people who have great difficulty navigating the health system on their own. It's essential for patients, it's essential for families as they try to deal with their illness and try to rebuild their lives. We need fair access to the NDIS and disability supports, and we need to ensure that our systems recognise the fluctuating, invisible and complex nature of ME/CFS and long COVID and respond with empathy and consistency. And finally, we need dedicated ME/CFS research funding. You'll hear soon from Australia's Chief Medical Officer, who does talk about, and we're very grateful for, the $50 million allocation by the federal government to long COVID research. The outcome is that research is primarily for long COVID, and ME/CFS has not benefited from any dedicated money out of that MRFF funding. We need accelerated, targeted investment through the MRFF and the development of a national ME/CFS research strategy by the sector and for the sector. With those words, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to tell you a bit about Emerge Australia's newest ambassador, Lily Schubert. I'm delighted, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Lily as our first speaker today. Lily is a Sydney-based content creator and chronic illness advocate known for her candid storytelling on TikTok. Diagnosed with ME/CFS, POTS and other related conditions, Lily spent 6 long years largely bedbound. Through her videos, Lily shares her journey of resilience, and gradual improvement, including milestones like stepping outside after years indoors and taking her first swim in 6 years. Her content offers insight into the daily realities of living with severe ME/CFS, and she aims through her work to raise awareness and foster understanding. Please welcome Emerge Australia Ambassador Lily Schubert.
Thank you so much, Anne, for that kind introduction and for having me here today. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share my story. 9 years ago, mere weeks after I turned 16, I got sick. Like it happened many times in my life so far, I went through the necessary process. I took days off school, I took medicine, rested, and visited the doctor. And like it happened many times before, I had a comfortable expectation that soon enough I would feel better. What happened instead altered the course of the next decade of my life. Instead of a recovery from what seemed to everyone to be a temporary illness, my symptoms persisted and worsened day by day. For months, I could barely leave bed, as my parents and I searched desperately for answers and solutions. The GPs I'd seen my whole life were either dismissive or dumbfounded. No one could tell me what I needed to do. I was a healthy teenager on the brink of entering my final years of school. I had always been a dreamer. I worked hard and had goals of university overseas and an accomplished career. I dreamed of travel, relationships, and the simplicity of having fun with my friends. Instead, I was thrust into a world of endless doctor's appointments and testing. My parents were frightened. They tried their best to shield me from their devastation and fear, knowing I was feeling a world of my own. I stopped being able to attend school, go out with friends. I couldn't even lift my head from the pillow. In rapid silence, I disappeared. The next years of my life were filled with crushing quiet, loneliness, and limitless fatigue. After the requisite 6 months of symptoms, and after ruling out all other possible diagnoses, I was told I have severe ME. There was a before and an after of that moment. Before, I was living with hopeful determination that my condition was impermanent, a brief bout of suffering. After, I was informed that severe ME had no treatment or cure, and that once someone descends into a bedbound state, there is less than 5% chance of recovery. I was 18. I should have had my whole life ahead of me. Instead, I slowly withered away in a haze of symptoms. So severe, my mum often left for work wondering if I would be alive when she arrived home. I lived in silence and darkness, unable to tolerate light or sound, unable to read, speak, or move. The things that once filled my days, school, friends, and plans of the future, faded into the background as survival became my only focus. Revisiting the state that I was in order to deliver this speech to you, has been no less than excruciating. 6 years was over 2,000 days. Each held their own shape, some filled with endless emotional agony, some filled with numbness, some with foreboding, and some with such a pervasive sense of disquiet. But every single day was filled with pain. A fatigue so extreme I felt like I was submerged in concrete, a fog so dense I couldn't think, and chronic pain so severe my pillow often soaked up hours of tears. Severe ME feels like dying. It feels like cellular death, like organs failing and a body breaking down. For me, death felt like it would be a welcome reprieve from the suffering that I was being forced to endure. What I went through was inhumane. I lost all human contact and touch. I was locked in a prison that resembled my bedroom, a world reduced to 3 square meters. Through those years, I went through hundreds of potential treatments, supplements, supportive therapies, and medications. I had parents who were utterly committed to finding anything that would offer me even a moment of reprieve, and a doctor whose whole practice is committed to improving the lives of those suffering with severe chronic conditions. Despite everything I just told you, many within the ME community would consider me one of the lucky ones. Life went in cycles, defined by courses of treatment that either worsened my condition or did nothing at all. I learned to numb myself. I grieve now, thinking about that 20-year-old girl, so full of despair, she didn't want to feel hope. It had only hurt her. But there was so much quiet strength inside of her, a fire that refused to die out all of the way. I get asked sometimes how I held on all of those years. I've never known how to answer. With a prognosis of life imprisonment inside a body full of suffering, I don't really know how I did it. Internally, I gave up, over and over. Externally, I quietly cried and silently screamed. The two people who saw every corner of my devastation were my parents. They carried me and each other through a situation that's unthinkable to most. What I received should be the baseline of support offered to those with ME. It is a life-altering diagnosis that shouldn't come with life-ending consequences. Before I found my doctor, I was faced with dismissal, gaslighting, and medical abuse. It undoubtedly worsened my condition beyond repair. Every time I was forced to advocate for myself, it came at an energetic cost I could not afford. I had faith in a system built to help me, and instead it failed me, repeatedly. I fell through the cracks. No one should have to fight as hard as I had to fight just to receive adequate care. My experience taught me something powerful, that education saves lives. When clinicians aren't equipped with up-to-date knowledge about ME/CFS, patients suffer unnecessarily. Clinical education is the bridge between research and reality. It's how discoveries become better care, how disbelief turns into understanding, and how stigma turns into support. We need to make sure every GP, every specialist, every allied health professional in Australia has access to proper clinical education about ME/CFS, not as an afterthought, but as an essential part of their training. But education alone isn't enough. It has to be built on something. And that's why research matters. It's not abstract, it's deeply personal. Studies like the Decode ME project in the UK are groundbreaking. It's one of the largest genetic studies ever done on ME/CFS, involving tens of thousands of participants. Every data point represents a person, someone who has been waiting years, even decades, to be understood by science. But we can't rely only on international studies to move the needle. Here in Australia, we need a coordinated national ME research strategy, one that sets clear priorities, funds meaningful studies, and connects universities, hospitals, and government. We need to invest in identifying biomarkers, developing treatments, and building the scientific evidence that will guide clinical care. Because for too long, people with ME in Australia have been waiting for research from elsewhere to tell their story. It's time our own nation led the way in understanding and addressing this illness. The more we invest in understanding this illness, the more stories we can change. For me, and for so many others, research represents the possibility of a different ending, one shaped by knowledge, compassion, and evidence instead of uncertainty and neglect. I'm standing here today against a lot of odds. I'm standing here because I was lucky. Medication that doesn't work for everyone worked for me. The right combination of time, circumstance, a multitude of supportive therapies, and a little sprinkle of a miracle. I'm standing here because I survived, and I'm choosing to stand here for all of the people who still can't stand. Thank you.
What can I say? How do you follow that? Lily, thank you. That was not an easy story for you to tell in front of all of these people, but you touched our hearts. your experiences, your passion, your advice. We love it, and we thank you so much for telling that story. I'm known for bursting into tears, so I'm sorry. It really affects me when I hear such touching stories, and we're just so pleased that you could be with us here today. So thank you so much. I'm sure the importance of Lily's presentation would not have been lost on our next speaker if he were here. Professor Michael Kidd, AO, apologises that due to very unforeseen personal circumstances, he's unable to be here in person. And we're extremely grateful that Professor Kidd agreed to record a short presentation. Professor Kidd is a GP, primary care researcher, educator, and former president of the RACGP. He commenced as Australia's Chief Medical Officer in June this year. Please welcome Professor Michael Kidd.
Hello. I start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the beautiful lands and waters where you are meeting today, the Ngunnawal people. I pay my respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all First Nations people here today. I recognise the enduring connection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to country, and I invite everyone to reflect on our shared responsibility to honour and respect this special place and its stories. I also acknowledge our hosts and our distinguished guests and colleagues, but I especially want to acknowledge those in the audience with lived experience of myalgic encephalomyelitis and or chronic fatigue syndrome, as well as those who have experienced long COVID and other related energy limiting conditions. Thank you for inviting me to share this message with you as you gather to discuss the impact that ME/CFS has on a community of people that has for too long remained invisible to many parts of our health system. We know that many people in Australia live with ME/CFS and related conditions. I'm advised that around 75% of affected people are women, and up to 25% of those affected are housebound, and many are bedbound. The economic burden alone is high, yet the true cost is measured in lives constrained, opportunities lost, and voices unheard. Despite the scientific evidence confirming the genuine biological basis of ME/CFS, stigma persists. Our challenge and the opportunity presented by today's event is to move from stigma to science and from invisibility to action. At the heart of this forum and of all meaningful progress are the voices of those affected. People with ME/CFS have described the harrowing suffering and the struggle to be believed and be supported. As a general practitioner, I know that acknowledging and respecting lived experience is not only valid, it's essential. Research and policy must be grounded in the realities that are faced by people every day, not just in clinical data. The Australian Government has recognised these unmet needs. In April 2023, a $50 million investment was made from the Medical Research Future Fund for research into post-acute sequelae of COVID-19, including long COVID and ME/CFS. This funding is now supporting innovative research to improve our knowledge, clinical guidance and health outcomes for the community. Additionally, funding has also been allocated to the National Health and Medical Research Council to develop new Australian clinical guidelines for ME/CFS, long COVID and related conditions. These guidelines, expected to be finalised in early 2028, are being developed in close consultation with peak bodies and with those with lived experience, ensuring that patient voices are central to shaping care, and I thank those of you involved in the guideline development. Thank you for your presence today, for your advocacy and for your courage. Together we can move together to move from stigma and science and from silence to meaningful change. Thank you.
Thank you. In your absence, Professor Kidd, I don't know about you, but hearing Australia's Chief Medical Officer acknowledge the importance of the patient voice and the suffering experienced for too long by people with ME/CFS, let alone the importance of moving from stigma to meaningful change, is actually significant. And I thank our Chief Medical Officer for taking the time to record that message, and we look forward to working with him and the government and our departmental people to create that change for people with ME/CFS. As has already been demonstrated by a key feature of today, is hearing firsthand what it's like to live with ME/CFS. I'd like to welcome Tracy Collins and ask her to come forward to speak now. Tracy lives with severe ME/CFS, and she's going to share her story and tell you why change is so urgently needed. And I thank you, Tracy, for making the trip down here to Australian Parliament House to speak in person, which you were really keen to do. Thank you, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Anne, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today to share my experience. This wouldn't have been possible if I wasn't one of the few people with ME/CFS that has access to NDIS supports. I thought I'd start by asking you to consider a few questions. Has anyone ever experienced jet lag after a long-haul flight where you're sleep deprived and exhausted? Has anyone ever experienced migraines where you've got stabbing pain, nausea, and severe light and sound sensitivity? I'm sure we've all had a bad flu where we're bedbound, like we can't get up. We get hot and cold fevers, we're coughing, our noses are running, our whole body aches, and we've got that hot and cold feeling. Has anyone ever had a concussion where you're dizzy, you've got headaches and problems with your memory, thinking and concentration? And was anyone unfortunate enough to have to experience hotel quarantine where you're unable to leave and you're unable to interact with other people? Can you imagine what it would be like to experience all of those things at the same time? And can you imagine if that was your daily life, not knowing if or when it would ever change? That's just a tiny glimpse into my experience, and I think Lily put it extremely well earlier, but I suppose that shows a little of what it's like for me to live with severe ME/CFS, and a slight glimpse into the life of thousands of other Australians living with that today. For me, this started because it took 16 years for me to receive a diagnosis of ME/CFS. At every GP visit over those 16 years, I would raise strange and seemingly unrelated symptoms, along with poor quality sleep and life-impacting fatigue. Each time tests would be run, they'd come back normal. Each time I would try and figure out what was wrong and keep going with my normal life. I finally thought I'd figured it out and that it might be ME/CFS, so I went to my GP to ask about it. And she told me, word for word, stop Googling your symptoms. Even if you have it, there's nothing that can be done for it. So instead, focus on living an active life. 18 months later, I was finally diagnosed with ME/CFS. The well-intentioned cardiologist who diagnosed me told me the treatment for ME/CFS was, yes, graded exercise therapy. Even though at that stage I was still managing to work full-time, mostly at home, and I would walk or do yoga most days of the week, he told me to stop doing that exercise and instead start jogging around my backyard for 5 minutes a day and increasing that by an extra minute each day. I'd never gone for a run before in my life, and I jokingly referred to this to my husband as my daily torture session. But I did it for 4 weeks until I collapsed and I haven't recovered. At every one of those appointments over those 16 years, the outcome for me could have been changed. If just one of those doctors had known how to recognise ME/CFS and had explained the importance of learning to pace rather than pushing through my symptoms and doing graded exercise therapy, I'm confident I would not be in the position that I am today. And the worst thing is, this story is not uncommon amongst ME/CFS sufferers. A long wait for diagnosis is not the exception, it's the norm. And finding medical professionals who are willing and able to help us is near impossible. Excuse me for a second. In fact, I recently ran a poll in the ME/CFS Australia Community Facebook group, an amazing community, asking how many medical practitioners people had seen for diagnosis and treatment. In only 3 days, we had 412 responses. Together, we identified 48 different types of health professionals that we had consulted, including 22 different types of medical specialists. Combined, we'd consulted 2,627 clinician types, an average of more than 6 types each. But many have seen dozens and more than one of each type. With all of these consultations and the thousands of people suffering from ME/CFS today, how many millions of patient and taxpayer dollars are being spent searching for and often still not finding answers? Still today, there is no clear path to diagnosis and treatment for ME/CFS in our medical system. There's no one medical specialist college responsible for it, and no compulsory comprehensive training for any medical professional about it. So why am I here today? It's hard, but I wanted our decision makers to see at least a little of what this disease looks like face to face. Beautiful. And for you to understand the devastating toll that this disease takes on the people living with it, and our carers and our families. But most importantly, I want to ask you to stop this preventable suffering. Over the past 12 months, as has been mentioned, 3 important things have happened. The Albanese government and the Honourable Minister Butler have invested in the development of clinical practice guidelines for ME/CFS by the NHMRC. This is critical work, but it will take at least another 2 years to complete. Secondly, the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners have established the specific interest group for energy limiting and post-infection conditions, being led by Associate Professor Bernard Shue. This is welcome recognition of the critical need for GPs to have extended skills and knowledge to manage such complex conditions. And thirdly, Emerge Australia has collaborated with the American Bateman Horne Centre of Excellence to develop exceptional quality, evidence-based educational materials for clinicians, patients, and carers. With these 3 essential elements now in place, I believe we're in the best position we have ever been to finally make systemic change happen. But we must act now to lay the foundations for the successful implementation of the new clinical practice guidelines in 2028. To do this, I asked the Albanese government, through Minister Butler, to invest immediately in 3 key areas. Firstly, clinical education for all healthcare practitioners, including GPs, specialists, and allied health professionals. This education must focus on preventing harm by overcoming the entrenched misconceptions about ME/CFS. It must give practitioners the confidence to recognise and diagnose it early, to facilitate symptom management and recommend pacing, not graded exercise therapy. Secondly, we need investment in advanced clinical education for any and all healthcare professionals that want to go beyond the basics and who are willing to treat those of us who are severely unwell and disabled. This will enable the establishment of a network of knowledgeable, confident and accessible practitioners to provide best practice clinical care to all those who need it, not just those who can afford to pay for it. And thirdly, we need an investment in the expansion of patient support services. Like the McGrath Foundation Cancer Care Nurses, the Emerge Australia Telehealth Nurse Service is an absolute lifeline. These nurses provide up-to-date information, management tools, and practical and emotional support. This mode of support has a proven track record and requires significant increased and secure funding to expand its capacity to support all Australians living with this condition and our carers. I'm here today to ask you to decide to act now and allocate the funding necessary to prevent thousands more people needlessly becoming permanently disabled like me before the NHMRC guidelines are released in 2028. Before I finish, I'd like to share something that I wrote on my personal blog, which is called Not Just Tired. ME/CFS is a life lived in pyjamas and darkness, where having a shower counts as strenuous exercise and takes many days to recover from. Where reading must be strictly restricted. Having a conversation is exhausting. Using any screen is painful. The joy of listening to music is forbidden. Moments of light, connection, and meaning are so rare that they are truly treasured. Being here today is one of those moments for me, but it comes at a significant cost. It will take weeks and maybe months for me to recover back to my already limited baseline. Sorry. So when you leave work here today and you go out to dinner or you drive or fly home, when you walk your dog on the weekend, go to a cafe or catch up with family and friends, when you watch a movie or you just go to the shops and grab some groceries, please remember that you are lucky to be living the life that I and every ME/CFS patient used to live. When you're doing each of these things, please remember us. We will be confined to our homes and our beds in dark, quiet rooms. We and our carers and our supporters will be living in hope that you take action to end the discrimination and the needless suffering patients living with ME/CFS have endured for nearly 100 years. Thank you.
Tracy.
Sorry.
No. This is what we hear at Emerge Australia from all our wonderful people with ME/CFS. This is their reality. Feeling invisible, feeling unseen and unheard. And Tracy, you've reminded us all of the suffering that you go through. And we're here today to seek change and to ensure that by working together with our government and elected officials, we can make a change. We can ensure that there is greater investment that is dedicated to ME/CFS. So thank you. Thank you so much. I want to welcome those members of Parliament who've just arrived, and the at 2 o'clock we have question time, and so our members of parliament will need to leave, and we're indebted to those of you who've come here for this short period of time. And against the backdrop of Tracy's presentation, it gives me great pleasure to welcome one of our co-chairs of our soon-to-be confirmed Parliamentary Friends Group of MECFS, Dr. Mike Freelander. Member for Macarthur since 2016, Mike is a paediatrician and chair of the government's Health and Aged Care and Disability Committee. Mike is committed to supporting Australians with MECFS and long COVID and other associated energy limiting conditions. And we're delighted you could be with us here today, Mike. Welcome.
Thanks. Thanks, Anne, and thank you all for having me here today. I'd like to acknowledge that we're here on the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people and pay my respects to them and their elders, past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues, Senators Jordan Steele John and fellow paediatrician Monique Ryan, and I'm not sure if anyone else is here. I don't want to miss anyone. As you know, I was part of a committee that did deliver a report now a few years ago on long COVID and MECFS. And whilst I acknowledge that the government has provided some support, I think it is common knowledge that many of our recommendations have not as yet met with approval from the government and funding, more importantly. And I apologise for that, because I think that the community that you represent does struggle to attract support across all levels of government and indeed even in the health system. And I think that some of the stories that we've heard today are very harrowing, and I think no one could sit here without acknowledging that there is much more that needs to be done. As a government, we are committed to trying to support all Australians with chronic illness, and I think that whilst it is important that we prioritise many public health concerns, Emerge has really worked above and beyond the funding they get, and I pay tribute to Anne Wilson and the efforts that she's made to, I agree, to bring the issues of MECFS and long COVID to the forefront of government and politicians in general. And I commit to doing as much as we can to make sure that more is given to the community to engage in research, particularly health education for not just doctors but community nurses, health organisations and others involved in care. I also think it is very important that we look at how mechanisms of support can be given to those most severely affected. And I note your long-term aspirations to have NDIS funding approved for people who are most severely affected by MECFS, and I completely agree. The Health Minister is certainly aware of the issues that you're facing, and I know it does seem a long time to get approval, but I can assure you we are still trying to make sure that the recommendations that my committee made are carried through with. There is concern across the Parliament about how we can support people with chronic illness, and we've recently, for example, completed an inquiry into diabetes. We again are still waiting for a formal ministerial support, and whilst it is not a laughing matter, I can assure you that there are many health priorities that we will act on in the coming months, and yours is certainly one of them that I'm hoping for further action on. I remain committed to putting the concerns of the MECFS community to the government. I think in particular my focus is on how we can better fund research. We know that there have been some research papers published over the last few years that have given some science to the concerns, and much more needs to be done to make sure that research is followed through. I'd also comment that we are still seeing the effects of long COVID in our communities. I know in my electorate we are seeing people who are still suffering from the effects of long COVID. And I also note that there are major concerns still around the tertiary clinics, such as the St Vincent's Clinic in New South Wales for long COVID and ME/CFS, losing support and losing government funding. And that is something that will be negotiated with the states around the hospitals agreement over the coming months. And the ME/CFS clinics, I certainly think will be part of that discussion. So I'm very grateful that you've invited me here today with my colleagues. I also note the Assistant Minister Jed Carney's here, who's been a strong supporter of your community, and she certainly was when she was Assistant Health Minister. And your concerns will be put in front of government on an ongoing basis, I can assure you. I apologise for the delay in responding to all the recommendations in the report. Governments, I've found, move very slowly, but we will, I'm sure, be able to support the community on an ongoing basis in the future, and your concerns are well in front of government at the present time. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Mike. They're very reassuring words, and Mike's been a great supporter of Emerge Australia and obviously, more importantly, of the ME/CFS community, and we're delighted you could be with us. Today, as I've already mentioned, we have question time starting very soon, and we'd like, therefore, to invite Senator Jordan Steele-John, another major supporter of people with ME/CFS and people with disabilities. We'd love you to come forward now and talk to us. And Jordan is, of course, the other co-chair of the Parliamentary Friends of ME/CFS support group. So thank you for coming, Jordan, and welcome.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Anne, and thank you to my fellow co-chair, Dr. Freelander, for your comments here today. I want to acknowledge as well that we are gathered on unceded First Nations land, on Ngunnawal and Ngambri land, and pay respect to elders, past and present. Since the people of WA decided to send me to the Senate about 8 years ago, one of the consistent campaigns, communities and issues that we've worked on is improving supports for the ME/CFS community. And as I look back at that work, there are a couple of things that really stick out to me. Firstly, the relentlessness of a community so institutionally disregarded and often subject to discrimination. Regardless of the fact that so many elements of our medical system so often are the very engine rooms of the stigma that we've discussed today, so many in the community continue to push and push and push. It takes incredible energy and effort to do that for any group within the community. But for this group to have continued that level and scale of advocacy is an incredible testament to the internal determination and iron will of so many who experience ME/CFS and their families and supporters. The phrase that is often used in this space is to talk of the missing millions throughout Australia, and indeed the missing millions across the world. But because of that continued advocacy and because of that collective strength, those missing millions, those unheard within our community, have continued to push and to shake at the doors of power, to try to shake those in positions of power out of their stupor when it comes to this issue. And I think that's something we can be really proud of, really proud of. In preparing for my remarks today, I looked at the timeline for the development of the new clinical guidelines. I was struck by two things. One, that although I'm sure sets out a timeline for the redevelopment of those guidelines that meets the basic criteria of good clinical development for the NHMRC, if I was somebody living with ME/CFS right now, or had a family member that did, I have many friends that do, that timeline, that deadline of a draft guideline by 27 would feel a very long way away. The other thing that strikes me is what an achievement it is to have that development process underway at all. Because for years and years and years, when we advocated in this space, the standard response was, no, we've got some stuff we did in 2002, it's fine. We don't need to look at this at all. And it took a lot of effort for us to get to a place where there is a new process underway. I also would like to acknowledge the incredible hope that gatherings like this give to so many people in the community. And that hope created by moments like this, it's only possible because of organisations like Emerge and individuals that put so much time and effort and energy into not only ensuring that collectively the community is able to speak to the Parliament more broadly, but also that within these spaces there is more than calls and emails and those spaces where people, rightly reach out to their MP and say, come on now, what are you doing? But there are also these kind of spaces where we can hear expert evidence and lived experience. And I want to acknowledge Tracy for what you shared with us today, and the toll that sharing that will take on you. And I want to share with you that your story has lodged searingly in my brain, won't be forgotten for a long time. And I think that I speak on behalf of a lot of people today who heard that. It will stay with them as a humanizing case study of why we need action. And I hope that knowing that helps you to feel as though it was energy well spent, when energy is precious to you. Thank you for continuing to organise and to speak so effectively. The Australian Greens will continue our solidarity and our work alongside you to ensure that the silence, wherever it still exists, is broken. The stigma, where it resides, is called out, driven out, and replaced with evidence-based practice. And the government systems, from the NDIS to Medicare and everywhere in between, are transformed so that they support people with ME/CFS rather than the current situation where they are often so much of the barrier that needs to be navigated. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope you have a good rest of the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Again, very, very comforting words from our two co-chairs of our Parliamentary Friends Group of ME/CFS, and we're delighted that you could be here with us today. We're going to move right along right now to our next presentation, which will be via video, and that is from Associate Professor Bernard Shue. Bernard is the clinical director of Banksia Medical Centre and Geelong Long COVID Clinic in Victoria. He's as associate professor, he is deeply committed to advancing patient care in ME/CFS, long COVID, and other complex chronic conditions. He's also an experienced researcher and a medical educator, and in fact, Bernard speaks on behalf of Emerge Australia in the clinical education that we conduct around Australia all year round. Bernard apologises that he could not be here in person today. He's currently in Hong Kong and has kindly recorded this video message for us. So please welcome Associate Professor Bernard Shu.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many people here today. Patients, carers, researchers, clinicians, and policy leaders, all coming together for one purpose, to create change. For far too long, people living with ME/CFS, long COVID, and other energy-limiting conditions have been forced to navigate systems that they don't understand. Many have faced disbelief instead of support, stigma instead of science. But today, that's changing. We are here to move from stigma to science and from silence to action. Every Australian deserves access to safe, affordable, high-quality healthcare. Yet, for tens of thousands of people living with these conditions, that right remains out of reach. Many are unable to work or study. Families are stretched thin. People who once lived full, active lives now measure their days in minutes of energy. And too often, the systems meant to help, health, disability, income, support, simply just don't. They are not designed for invisible, fluctuating, and complex illnesses. The result is a silent crisis of isolation, loss, and frustration. But it doesn't have to be this way. These conditions are not rare, and they are not hopeless. What they need, what patients deserve, is recognition, research, and a system that truly listens. The last few years have brought us an important shift. We are finally seeing science catching up to what patients have known for decades. Studies like the Decode Me project in the UK are beginning to uncover genetic factors that explain why some people don't recover after infection. Research across Australia and around the world is revealing changes in the immune system, autonomic nervous system, and cellular energy pathways. This is no longer a mysterious disease. It is a measurable biological condition. And that scientific understanding must now drive how we educate, how we treat, and how we support our patients. But here's the challenge. Most clinicians were never taught how to recognize or manage these conditions. In medical school, ME/CFS might have been mentioned once, if at all. And in postgraduate training, there's often no structured education on energy limiting or post-viral syndromes. So when a patient walks into our consultation, exhausted, brain fogged, struggling to describe their pain or fatigue, many GPs are left uncertain. The symptoms are multisystemic, the investigations often unremarkable, and the treatment options are limited. Without training, it can feel like working in the dark, unsure how to diagnose, how to plan investigations safely, or how to support someone whose life has changed overnight. This is not lack of compassion, it is a lack of education, and that is something we can fix. Education is where transformation begins. We cannot fix what we do not understand. And for too long, clinicians have had little trainings on ME/CFS or long COVID. That's why I'm proud to share that the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners has now established a specific interest group on energy limiting and post-infection conditions, known as the LPIC. This group brings together GPs, specialists, researchers, and patient advocates to ensure clinical practice is grounded in the latest evidence. We are contributing to the NHMRC's upcoming National Clinical Guidelines for ME/CFS, and we are building resources to help every GP to manage these conditions safely and confidently. Our vision is simple. When clinicians are informed, patients are believed. When systems are educated, care becomes equitable. Education turns compassion into competence. So, where do we go from here? First, we must invest in research. Australia must build on the Decode Me discoveries to uncover biomarkers, diagnostic tests, and treatments. We need research that explains cause, guides therapy, and qualifies the economic and social cost of this disease. Second, we must invest in clinical educations. GPs and health professionals must be equipped with current evidence-based training so that care is safe, consistent, and compassionate. Third, we must ensure equitable access to care. People with ME/CFS and long COVID need affordable, multidisciplinary, and often home-based care. Many cannot travel to appointments. Telehealth access is not a luxury, it's actually a lifeline for them. And finally, we must reform disability and income support. The NDIS and disability support pension must recognize these conditions for what they are: serious, disabling, and deserving of equity. Assessors need training informed by science, not stigma. This is not about asking for special treatment. It is really about equal treatment. We stand at a crossroads. The science is here. The stories are powerful. The moral case is undeniable. But progress doesn't happen on its own. It takes leadership, persistence, and courage from people in this room, from organizations like Emerge Australia, and from government ready to listen. Let's imagine a future where a patient with ME/CFS or long COVID or the like doesn't have to explain their illness over and over again because every clinician already knows what it is. A future where education turns isolation into understanding and evidence turns efficacy into action. Together, we can make that future real. And let's move together from stigma to science, or from science to change. Thank you.
Wouldn't everyone like to have a GP like that? Bernard's indeed a lovely man, and he was really sorry that he couldn't be here today. And his words are inspirational, and he is an inspirational man. The RACGP Special Interest Group is a big step forward for us, and I can really feel that things are changing. To hear GPs in senior positions talking the way they do, to hear our members of parliament saying the things that they're saying. I've only been in this job for 4.5 years, but I didn't hear those things 4.5 years ago. So we're on a trajectory, and let's together make sure that we create that change, because there are a lot of people out there wanting it to happen. And so I do thank Bernard, who of course has reminded us of the challenges of consulting patients with ME/CFS, particularly where those clinicians are not educated and don't have the confidence or the knowledge to be able to help patients in the way that they need to be helped. So in his absence, I thank Bernard on your behalf. Now, throughout today, we've had a particular study mentioned on many occasions, and that's the Decode ME study that was conducted out of Edinburgh under Professor Chris Ponting. and he is in fact our next guest. We couldn't bring him to Australia to present in person, but he has kindly prepared a video message for us. Chris was the lead investigator in the Decode Me study, the largest ME/CFS study ever conducted, which confirmed genetic factors are associated with the condition. Another shift that has now happened that people are talking about. You heard it from Michael Kidd, you heard it from Mike Freelander, you've heard it from Jordan Steele John, from Bernard Shue, and you're now going to hear it from Professor Chris Ponting. So let's listen to his video. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Chris Ponting. I'm the Chair of Medical Bioinformatics at the University of Edinburgh and an investigator on a study called Decode ME. Today, I'm going to tell you something about the project and its initial results. I'll tell you why we do ME genetics, how we got to the study, what its results are, what they might mean, and lastly, but most importantly, why a national ME research strategy is essential. So why ME genetics? Well, mainly because if genetic evidence supports a drug target, then it doubles the likelihood of success of that target in clinical development. In other words, pharmaceutical companies need genetics in order to progress their work. And then secondly, genetics is unbiased and comprehensive. It can survey all of the genes in the genome. It isn't built on pre-existing evidence and hypotheses. And it can pinpoint bodily systems such as the nervous system or the immune system that to date we don't know for certain are definitely involved in ME. So why have we done the ME project, genetics project called Decode ME? Well, we have three main goals for this project. Firstly, to identify the genetic variants that predispose people to ME, because this would begin to explain the biological mechanisms that underlie the disease. Secondly, we wanted to build a cohort of individuals and their data that would help for future research, not by us, but by others. And we are giving out the data where there is consent to any and all researchers in academia and industry from around the world. So that is our third goal, to make sure that we have disseminated the data so that so much more can be done and quickly. Importantly, the Decode ME project was and is a co-production with the ME community, people with lived experience sitting alongside researchers taking decisions along with us. So where have we got to in our study? We had tens of thousands of people who signed up for their interest. 25,000 and more completed the questionnaire. And of these, we have DNA from over 16,500 people. And the initial results that we pre-printed in early August 2025 was from a set of over 15,500 people of European ancestry. And we are working on the genetics of all our participants for whom we have the genetic data as we go. So Decode ME has discovered that there are 8 regions of the human genome in which there are DNA differences that help to predispose people to having a diagnosis of ME/CFS. These are regions of chromosomes 1, 2 on 6, and 12 and 13, 17, and 20. And what we have shown is that these are regions that contain several genes, and those genes are most active, not just anywhere in the body, but are most active in the brain. There are 13 different tissues that in which these genes are most active, and significantly so, and all 13 are brain tissues. This highlights what perhaps we previously thought but did not have strong evidence for, that ME is in part a neurological system in disease with nervous system involvement. So one of our regions, for example, on chromosome 17, that signal is next to a gene called CA10, and that signal overlaps with high precision and statistical significance a previously known signal that others had shown to be there for chronic pain. So what's happened here is that the genome is speaking back to us of chronic pain, what is obviously a symptom that people with ME have spoken to us about for such a long time. The DNA evidence speaks to us of people with ME's symptoms. Then there are other signals elsewhere in the genome that, that indicate other processes, that indicate the immune system involvement in ME. For example, on chromosome 13, a very evident signal that is next to a gene, OLFM4, that is well known to have function in the neutrophils to dampen down the body's response to infection. Now, what we have seen in the last couple of months is that the genetics of ME does not stand apart from all other diseases. In particular, there are two places in the genome where the genetics coincide with fibromyalgia, and indeed fibromyalgia overlaps with other diseases like long COVID. And previously, work done by the company Precision Life has shown an overlap in the genes that are associated with long COVID and ME. So in short, what we are seeing here is that the predisposing genetic factors for these different diseases are overlapping. So what are the implications of the results? Does having these 8 genetic differences mean that anyone might have ME? No, not necessarily. If people don't carry the genetic differences, that doesn't mean that they won't get ME. It doesn't also mean that we immediately have a new treatment or a new diagnostic test, unfortunately. So what is required is future research that will demonstrate what are the particular genes that contribute to ME and how they do so. And how can we now accelerate with the Decode-ME findings in hand, accelerate towards effective treatment and diagnosis? So this leads me to what I believe is essential in countries across the world. That is that each has a national ME strategy for research. I think there are 4 reasons why ME CFS proposals rarely meet funding criteria. Firstly, that less funding has in the past generated less evidence, and that there is more disagreement because there are now myriad hypotheses. There has been an aversion to addressing ME's complexity and clinical heterogeneity, and there is huge stigma, including in part by it being a female-biased disease. And there are 3 reasons why ME deserves a national strategy. A high prevalence, nearly 1% of females and 0.25% of males have ME in England. A huge and substantial health, social, and economic burden of disease. And then lastly, future-proofing. There's a high probability of another deadly pandemic after COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2. Over the next 25 years, the likelihood is that 50% chance that there'll be another such pandemic. So we need to future-proof against the inevitable resulting high burden of post-pandemic viral and bacterial diseases. So we have set up in the United Kingdom a network that is to attempt to address these issues. And one of its remits is to reach out to similar networks in other countries from across the world, including Australia. So I conclude with that remark, and to thank everyone in the Decode ME project for all the hard work that has been done over 5 and more years. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you to Chris Ponting. It was really good of him to come and talk about the study, which I think just when we heard about the outcomes of Decode Me, I think it caused so much excitement. The challenge that we face now is, what's Australia going to do with that? Do we need to replicate the study? Many would say no, but we do need to build on it. And I can see, Brett, you're putting your hand up there. Yeah, we need to take the outcomes of that study further. We need to look at what other research can be done that is specific ME/CFS research. Nothing against long COVID research, but Australia for far too long has had minimal allocations to ME/CFS research compared to other disease groups. So we thank Chris for his presentation, and we really hope that that leaves some kind of lasting impact, not only on us and on the research community, but particularly on the funders of research, to please look at how we can build and stand on the shoulders of those who've done the research in Edinburgh. Did you want to say something, Brett? You've got your...
Thank you. I know I'm on schedule, but we ran a study. We've done some genetics here locally. Ran a study through the clinic of the late great Don Lewis in East Melbourne. It was a much smaller study, but we found also neurological gene associations of chromosome 1.
Oh, well, there you go. So I guess you're saying we need more money because we need to take that study further.
Yeah, we had 100 participants. I mean, Chris talked about 16,000. And thank you very much to the Judith Jane Mason Foundation and ME Research UK, who supported our study through Don's clinic.
Great.
And found, yeah, just like Chris's study, neurological gene involvement.
Terrific.
I had to say that. Thank you. Not going on.
No problem. No problem. Well, we're going to break it up a little bit. You've had a lot of presentations with people talking and presenting. What we're now going to do is we're going to get a panel discussion going with the unsung heroes behind our people with ME/CFS, and that's obviously the families and carers. So I'd like to invite up here to join me Professor Ros Gledo and her husband, Professor Andy Gledo AO, who represent today Team Eliza. Eliza Charlie is one of Emerge Australia's ambassadors, and she is a great supporter of our work, but also a great advocate. And we're delighted to have her parents, Ros and Andy, here today. Yes, please welcome them. Now, I'd also like to invite Peter Schubert up here, and I'm wondering, Leanne, whether you would come up too, because we weren't expecting you to be here, and it would be wonderful. So Peter Schubert and his wife Lily are obviously here for Team Lily, who you've met and heard of, so we're delighted you could be here. And Pete McCluskey, where are you? So Pete McCluskey is here representing Team Jenny, and also is a father of a child with ME/CFS. So I'm going to come down here. I know it's difficult. I'm sorry we don't have a raised area where you can see us all, but this is just going to be, and you're going to have to time me because I'm sure it'll go over. This is just us to have really a bit of a chat, and I'm just going to ask sort of some basic questions that really talk about outlining the impact that ME/CFS has on families, on you as carers. So perhaps I'll just pass the microphone over and then we can just discuss it. I don't have many set questions, but I'm sure you've got a lot to share with us. So maybe I'll start with you, Ross. Sorry, didn't quite know. There you go.
Yeah, look, it's just amazing being here, and you two who spoke, Lily and Tracy. It's so heartfelt. I mean, they're just two of the voices that we know. There are millions like that we read about. So just thank you for your spending your energy with us. Sorry, I just had to say that. I feel I'm a slight fraud in the sense that I'm not Eliza's carer as such. However, we are part of Team Eliza because it takes a team of people to support someone with ME/CFS. And we were very late realising how sick she was. And I've said that before. It took us about a decade. But the impact on us has been, right, this is an issue. We are scientists. Let's bring our science brains to this. Let's read the papers. We know people. Let's get in touch with the researchers. Let's put this in the context of what we know about how science operates. And then that inevitably leads to advocacy. That's probably enough from me from now. I could talk for half an hour.
Just go along. Yeah, I absolutely endorse that. And thank you so much, Lily and Tracy. We were blubbing away up the back there because it's exactly what our dear Eliza has been through. And we were slow, as Ros said, to pick this up because she had already left home when she first contracted the thing. We knew that she was unwell, but we only saw her on the occasions when she actually gave everything to be there. So we saw her in those few moments, not realising the cost and how she would pay for that over the next week or weeks afterwards. But we absolutely knew she was ill, but the full extent of that took ages. And since then, as Ross said, we're both scientists. We read the scientific literature as best we can. Neither of us are medical researchers. But nonetheless, there are basically themes in science. There are ways science works, and we can understand what's going on and some of the implications of it. And it's incredibly exciting to see what is happening on multiple fronts. On the neurological front, and there's mitochondrial dysfunction that people are finding all sorts of things about. There's vascular problems that are serious. There's coagulation problems. And all of these are relevant and things are happening. There has never been a moment, I think, in terms of research opportunity for young researchers, and that's who I'd really like to speak to get involved. Young researchers are all looking for exciting problems with important outcomes that make a difference, and this is one. But there's one final point I just want to make, and that is, why is it important to fund research in Australia? Not just watch everything that's happening elsewhere. You can't actually watch what's happening elsewhere in the world unless you have active researchers in that field here in Australia. We may well be able to, some of our researchers may well make the breakthroughs and solve the problems, but they have access to all the others and they are devouring that and incorporating that into what they do. It brings it to Australia. So it's not only what we can do, it's the mechanism by which we get access fully to all the research going on in the world. And that's really important to support.
Thank you. Thank you for the late invitation to join this panel. I want to start by acknowledging Lily, and thank you for the words where you acknowledged Dad and I in your recovery and your journey through CFS ME. I think I really want to spend this time acknowledging just how many mistakes I made along the way.
And they were mistakes born from a place of love, but real fear around you, watching you, standing by and watching you just become more sick and more sick and sicker, and to the point where you acknowledged, I wondered whether I'd come home and you'd still be there. But I made mistakes along the way, along with the medical professionals that lacked the education. I wondered whether you should be getting out of bed. I wondered whether I should be pushing you harder. I wondered whether I was doing enough. And so to be here today and appreciate that whilst it was all coming from love, there's probably others out there wondering how they might support their loved ones differently. My loving support for you and continues for me is just to believe and trust in the instincts of the person with the illness. They know. They are the expert. Lily, you are the expert in you, and you continue to be the expert in you. People ask me, am I proud of Lily? I'm not proud of Lily. I'm in awe of Lily. I'm inspired by you. I work in trauma recovery as part of my profession, and I'm acutely aware that the gift of trauma, wouldn't we like not to be in trauma experiences, but the gift that you've received, that I've received through this experience, this painful, lonely experience, is wisdom and growth. And I see you there, Lily. Thank you.
There's something about carers' eyes. I mean, I've met a few of you here today, and I don't know if it's wisdom or pain or what it is in the eyes, but you look into someone's eyes that's been on the carer side, and you can see it. It's palpable. So I think that lots of people have made very, very powerful speeches today about the lived experience with this condition, Lily and Tracy particularly. And there's been lots of talk about the macro, if you like, the money needed for research and whatnot, but I'd like to focus a little bit on the micro. And the micro to me is that the Australia that I want to live in, and I think when it's at its best, is kind, it's egalitarian, it's generous. And the process that Lily has been through, and I can only speak to her directly because that's my lived experience, has just been undignified on so many levels because, it's a harrowing condition. I don't think I really expect governments and doctors to have all of the answers or all of the money, but it certainly would be great if we reached a point culturally where we weren't putting unnecessary impediments, particularly undignified impediments, in front of people suffering from these conditions. I mean, I'm sure that there's a real consistency about that. I had to struggle for the DSP. I had to, I remember one story where we were negotiating with Centrelink about something for Lily, and we'd already been through the notion that she's bedbound. She can't move. She's in a dark room. She can't lift her head off the pillow. Oh, can you bring her in? Okay. So let me tell you again, she can't move. And then, okay. And then someone else would ring you a week later and say, we need you to bring her in to assess her. We've got to eyeball her. It's those kinds of things. They're minor, but they just strip people and rob them of their dignity. And that makes the carer's job just horrendous. And because you're watching the pain and suffering just amplified. So I think we can do better. So thank you.
Again, I'm Peter on Team Jenny. Not that it's a competition, but it is. So Jenny and I got married in 1992, and at the end of 92, and Jenny got what we think was a flu at the end of 93. So we had one good year, and we've had 3 decades since then, where it's been very difficult. Early on, it was relatively mild. But then it progressed. In fact, the progression accelerated after graded exercise therapy. Anyone heard of that story before? So it's been a bit like a boiling the frog for me as a carer as well, because bit by bit, there's been more sacrifice. And to be a carer is nothing on being the patient, but it does introduce other complexity, and one of those which a lot of carers really struggle with is that they have a choice, and many make a choice of going in a different path than being that carer. Our lives became more complicated when our daughter was 14, and she also developed ME CFS. And I've described to people before that we didn't have the luxury of naivety. We knew straight away what the problem was, and I would go into our bedroom and see Jenny, who was bedbound, and Jenny's here today, and Jenny is nowhere near as severe as some of the stories we've had today, but we've spoken about Pam, and tomorrow is going to be pretty awful. But I would go into our bedroom and see Jenny in bed, and then I'd go and see my own daughter in another room and think, am I seeing the future for my daughter? It was a very difficult time, but being that carer means it's about sacrifice. So there's sacrifice in career. I had to make a lot of choices about career. Jenny and I all got together. We loved travelling. We were discussing yesterday that when we went on our honeymoon, Jenny took me hiking down the side of a volcano, which is the typical thing you do on a honeymoon. We just had so much that we did, and we've had to give up friendships as well, because your friends after a while hear no so often. You can't go to the pub with them or go to the footy. You can't do all those things, and it's I guess in the opportunity to speak to everyone today, and and those watching online, it's a bit of a nod to you carers out there, and letting you know that we can see you. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you for that. I'm just wondering if we could dig just a little bit deeper and ask you how you as an individual have coped. I mean, the challenges must have been immense. All of you have talked about those. What do you do? How do you look after yourself when you've got these insurmountable issues happening with your loved ones? The systemic issues. We hear so much where people say, I can't go to the doctor and can't have telehealth because I've got to go there for the first visit. And they say, well, unless you come, we can't treat you. So what happens, as you know far better than me, people just don't go to the doctor and then they get sicker and sicker. How do you cope seeing what's happening to your loved ones, and what are some of the mechanisms that enable you to keep putting one foot in front of the other, apart from the fact that it's your loved one who you adore and you want to help? But what are some of those internal struggles that you all have?
I'm just getting my words together. I think I come from a big medical family, and I have found it really hard. You talk about how it impacts you. I found it very hard that they don't accept this, that they deep down just think it's all in the head. It's deconditioning, graded exercise therapy will finish it, will fix it. We know that just made it worse. You look for personal impact. Of course, I just tossed off about talking about the science, but there is a deep impact. There are friends that you really wonder whether you can really be friends with them, because they gaslight Eliza, and they gaslight us when we talk about that. I think that's an incredible thing. You think twice about going to family functions because you think, well, I don't want to have this conversation. I've got a few tactful ways of putting it when they ask how she's getting on. And instead of spoons, which I think is a great analogy, I say how often she can have a shower. Is it once a week or once every 2 weeks or once every 3 weeks? People get that and they look at you a bit stunned and change the subject. So how do I cope with that and look after myself? My default, I'm afraid, is just to get busy. But I've changed the focus and I now get busy doing things for ME and doing things for organising things for Eliza.
I think the realisation that dawned so slowly for us, the reaction as parents when we really did start to see the full extent of how ill she was that you want to do something. You want to fix it. And I speak to the blokes particularly. You know, that's our role. We fix things. And very often and then you get to this point, and we would talk to Eliza, and there was a calmness in her accepting the position. She got to the point, she'd been through all this herself, and she said she got to the point where she realised that the cavalry wasn't coming. But it could come. The information is out there. It is emerging. Pardon the pun. It needs to come together. We are really on the brink of some very important advances in understanding, and understanding leads to things we can do about it. But there is something you have to get through. You have to realise that your role is just to help and support however you can. And it's not easy, and especially, you know, we are not the primary carers, like our friends here, but nonetheless we are part of the team, and the people who are at the front, they have, you know, our daughter's partner. He needs tremendous support. He needs a break from time to time when we can, you know, if we're there, we can take over some of that primary care. But also there is what we have got out of it so much is seeing the indomitable spirit that Eliza has. You know, the people who just jump to a conclusion that she must be depressed have never talked to her. She is not depressed, she is determined. She is suffering at an unbelievable level, but she is determined and trying her very best to connect with others in the same predicament, some of whom are in this room. And by sharing their resources, I think that is also going to be a very important part of the way forward. So there are different roles in being carers, but it really affects you.
A little inspired by what you've just said, Andy. I think I was very fortunate that I had you, Peter, and we would take on different roles through Lily's care, and I call us the human seesaw. It felt like the days I couldn't cope, Pete could, and I would leave the home not knowing whether I wanted to scream, vomit, and so I would leave there, and Pete would lift me. And then there'd be days that you'd be in despair and my warrior came forward and I would be there for you. I work in trauma, I also work in addiction recovery, and one of the recovery mantras of addiction recovery is a step at a time, a day at a time, and I needed to start living my own advice and live that way, live a moment at a time, and just, be a warrior, and then let myself collapse, actually, on other days, just collapse, feel the despair, feel the pain, express it, share it, let go of it, let it drop so that I didn't feel too burdened and overloaded at times. And I really want to say thank you that you were there for me.
Likewise. So everything Leanne said, but it's just lonely. It's just really lonely. I think that it is, as everyone's highlighted, a very misunderstood condition, And so you end up being one of one, or in our case, one of two, that really felt and understood the full ramification of what was going on, and has been talked about here. You repeat the same stories over and over and over again. I don't think people aren't well-meaning. I don't want to be cynical about it, but where some conditions, cancer or outwardly focused conditions that we're trained in, if you like, I think people have a higher level of empathy because they can see someone wearing a scarf or, around their head because they've lost their hair in chemotherapy. But ME, by its very definition, often is a disappearing illness. We've all heard that. And that means that everything just disappears. So Lily was in a dark room on her own, and therefore she's not part of the conversation. And when we brought her into the conversation, I think people struggled to connect with what was actually the gravity of what was going on. I don't think they weren't well-meaning, but they just didn't understand. So you end up retreating to in our case, we're very lucky. I have a partner. And if you don't and you're on your own, or I don't know what you do, to be honest, because as Leanne said, we bounced off each other a lot, found strength in one another. But it's lonely and it's sad.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. There is a level of loneliness and sadness. It's just grief. Every day there's grief, and it's sort of how you deal with that. One of the important things, we had a head start on many because I married Jenny and I married my best friend, and along with that comes the ability to introduce a lot of gallows humour into everything each day. Even when we're at rock bottom, we can always find a way to laugh. But it just grinds you down. It's always there. And you always have to be the sounding board when things are really bad. The patient, the person you love needs to be able to download sometimes on if they're able to, you need to be brave and patient and be caring. And all those things to make it work. But also I mentioned earlier, and I think life got better for us when we decided one day at a time was what got us through. So all those ideas, we used to plan our holidays 3 holidays ahead, and we always we're proud of that fact. And now we just hope that tomorrow is a good day. And we take what joy that we can from it and keep life pretty simple.
Thank you. Some pretty sobering words, but some amazingly sobering experiences that you've all gone through. I mean, I would love to take this conversation further, but I've heard the chime over there. I would like to, for a moment, acknowledge especially a lot of people who are at home who don't have anyone. People with ME/CFS who have severe ME/CFS, who are bedbound, housebound, they're on their own. Their lives are very, very challenging, and I think you'd all like to have one of these people here as people who are supporting you. And I just think that it's really important to acknowledge everybody who is in that severe state. And, perhaps through some of the initiatives that Emerge Australia is looking at, particularly in-home support. I mean, it doesn't come easy. It doesn't come, as Mike said, governments take forever to make a decision, but that's certainly on the table as far as we're concerned. And we see you, we hear you, we support you, and we'll do everything we can to help you in that isolation, because ME/CFS is isolating enough, let alone having the isolation of not having anyone at home to support you in the way that these wonderful people do. Having said all of that, I think there's a message here for us at Emerge Australia to look at how we can better also support the carers. I think that I'd love to work with all of you to see what we can do, because there are many carers out there. And you mentioned the grief and the loss. I think, you know, we know people with ME/CFS experience this grief and the loss all the time because of what they've lost and what ME/CFS has taken from them. But it's the grief and the loss of the families, let alone the siblings and others in the family who also need to be cared for by the family. And there are huge challenges in that area, and I think that that's an area of further research that needs to be done, and further support for families. So please thank our very brave people who've come here and spoken to you about their challenges. Thank you very much. That session was a great segue into our next speaker, and we're delighted right now to welcome Penelope McMillan. She won't be anybody who's new to any of you. She's well known to the audience. Penelope is advocacy lead at ME/CFS South Australia, and she's also a spokesperson for ME/CFS Australia. Penelope lives with severe ME/CFS, and as such was unable to travel to Canberra. I know she'd love to have been here, and she has kindly provided a video recording for us to listen to as well. So please welcome Penelope McMillan.
Hello, it's Penelope McMillan talking to you about access to primary health care for people with ME/CFS. We know this is a long-standing problem. You've heard about it before. There are well-documented issues. There's new information. And of course, we're seeking action. First of all, I do want to get across who we're talking about. Who are these people with ME/CFS? We're told that it's an invisible illness, and I hope you're all aware by now of the sunflower symbol, which assists us in identifying ourselves as people with a disability. There's a photograph. The first photograph is from Laura, who says, this is what CFS-ME looks like. If you look at Laura's face in that photograph, that's not the face of a relaxed, happy, super healthy person, but it doesn't look that unusual either, right? So Craig Pickering put some information about ME/CFS into AI and asked AI to create an image that would make ME/CFS visible. And you can see there that, yes, the face and shoulders, they look normal enough, but the distress of the illness, the discomfort, the pain, it's evident in that photograph. Where are these people? So Christina Cornelia Poulsen in Norway recently produced this image and about how your life shrinks. Before ME, we have work, cafe, travel, party, camping in the mountains, the gym, home. Then we have mild ME. Now I want to be really clear. Mild ME is considered to involve 50% loss of functional capacity. That means your life has shrunk in half. So with mild ME, some people still are able to work, often part-time, but they can go out to work and then they come home, and home is for recuperation. They go back out to work, come home and recuperate. That's their life. Moderate ME has shrunk to the home. Severe ME shrunk to the bed. And very severe ME, not only in bed, but in the dark and the quiet. What is a homebound life? So the first photograph there is from Lisa Taranto. It's a teddy bear representing people with ME inside the window. stuck inside the home. And then there's a photograph from Jenny, the view from inside. It's a very constrained life. And what is a bedbound life? Sarah Jane photographed her ceiling and then imposed on that some words about what she's experiencing while she's in bed looking at her ceiling. Despair, abandoned, isolated, overwhelming, judgment, forgotten, unrelenting, loss, trauma, neglect, and so on. What does very severe ME/CFS look like? That's a picture of Alan Matthews. Some of you will have seen it before. Sitting up like that was a very big deal for Alan. He does not normally sit up, but he did it so people can see just how frail he is with very severe ME. The most common questions asked of ME/CFS charities are, how can I get a diagnosis? And where can I find a health practitioner who understands ME/CFS? What do patients actually need from primary health care? They need a diagnosis. They need patient education, they need management of their illness, and they need treatment for symptoms. We have solutions, right? Telehealth for people who are homebound. Recently, a team at Flinders University, in which I'm a consumer member, did a systematic review of places where people who are homebound have access to telehealth, and they found that compared to in-person care for people who are homebound, telehealth significantly reduced healthcare utilisation, including hospital admission. It significantly enhanced health-related quality of life and significantly improved well-being. Education for health practitioners. Even a health practitioner who is happy to diagnose ME/CFS will often say, I'm really sorry, but there's nothing I can do for you. That's not true. There's plenty they could do, but they're not aware of what they can do. We need undergraduate education and we need continuing professional development. We should note that ME/CFS is a common and very disabling condition, and yet it's unfamiliar to many health practitioners. The average time to diagnosis for people in Australia, according to a 2024 survey, is 5.9 years. But research shows that most people remain undiagnosed. That 5.9 years is for those people who've been fortunate enough to find a diagnosis. Without a diagnosis, remember, even those who have a diagnosis are waiting years to get that diagnosis. Without the diagnosis, there is no appropriate care pathway. They have no access to an informed GP or practice nurse. They have no informed specialist care, and they have no informed allied health team. And the actions we're seeking are access to telehealth without the face-to-face requirement. Let people who are homebound access telehealth. Let people whose world consists of work and home only to access telehealth without the face-to-face requirement, and support that by adequately funded home visits, because most GP clinics cannot afford to have their staff going out on home visits. And nobody's saying face-to-face isn't important, but needs to be accessible, and for many people with ME/CFS, it means home visits. We're seeking undergraduate and continuing education for all health practitioners. This is a common condition, and all health practitioners should know about it. And then we need research funding to underpin evidence-based care, because right now, that evidence is the evidence we have is largely underpowered. And so that makes clinicians very cautious about applying it. The goal of these actions is to reduce illness severity and reduce the severity of disability. If people can get an early diagnosis and appropriate care, there is no need for many people to become as severely ill as they are or to remain that severely ill, and to be as disabled as we are and to remain this disabled. And And if we can do that, then we will be reducing the Australian economic burden, which is huge. Many, many billions of dollars every year that this costs Australia. And we'll also be reducing the personal losses, which I hope from the photographs earlier in this presentation you will understand. The personal losses are huge. We are appealing to you to help us to access informed and evidence-based, comprehensive primary health care. Thank you.
Thank you, Penelope. You so eloquently summarised so many of the issues that have already been raised today and really just emphasised the importance of competence in primary healthcare. The number one thing that patients tell us all the time, we need doctors who understand, we need doctors who know about ME/CFS, we need doctors who can diagnose, manage and treat people with ME/CFS. So we are hammering that point home. We need it heard and we need it acted upon. So thank you, Penelope. Our final speaker for the day is someone who to many of you needs absolutely no introduction. Zoe Simmons lives with ME/CFS and is a storyteller, change maker and advocate. She's also a TV host and media personality who uses the power of storytelling to make a difference. Today, Zoe reflects on equitable access to disability and income supports, as well as reminding us of her very personal journey. Please welcome Zoe Simmons.
Hello, everyone. I am Zoe, and I don't actually have a diagnosis of ME/CFS, so I do somewhat feel like an imposter when I come into these spaces. But the reality is a lot of us don't have diagnoses, a lot of us don't have answers, and that's because the system is very broken in many, many, many areas. I was in my early 20s when I started to experience chronic illness, and my life was suddenly turned upside down. I went from being someone that had just finished my degree, Bachelor of Journalism. I was in the top 15% of my cohort. I felt like it was time to smash things, and then I became unwell. And it's very hard because you have to do things like let go of your job. You can't do so many things that you used to. I was always in agonizing pain. I was always so tired. I was nauseous. I had headaches. I was sensitive to light. I was sensitive to sound. And I'd get so tired sometimes that I couldn't think. I couldn't speak. And that's the reality of how tired you can get. It's not just a little bit tired. It's literally struggling to function. It's being unable to function. And going from someone that I felt like always did so much to someone that struggled to feed myself and get out of bed, it was really, really hard, and it really impacted my self-worth. And I kind of thought, how am I ever going to be able to do anything or be successful or build a career when it's so inaccessible? Even getting something like working from home is almost impossible, despite the fact that it's an adjustment that people should be making in the workplace. But flexibility isn't something people really consider, or accessibility, particularly from a chronic illness perspective. And even in the disability community, energy impairments and limitations are still not considered as an access need. It was a lot of grief to go from being someone that, I don't know, I used to go out and dance and be able to walk. But chronic pain, chronic illness has largely taken that from me because it's too exhausting, it's too painful, it's too hard, it takes too much. And the fact that most people with ME in the room are in wheelchairs, sorry, I don't know actually how many of you have ME in this room, but the fact that a lot of us are wheelchair users, I think shows how physically demanding it is on our body just to exist. Like many in my situation, I went to doctors thinking that they would help. And unfortunately, like many in my situation, I experienced medical gaslighting, medical misogyny, and a lot of fat phobia. I first went to a doctor thinking she'd help because she was female, and instead she didn't even listen to my symptoms and just said, oh, well, it's dairy. And I was like, no, it's not dairy. She was like, yes, it is. I was like, no, it's not. I'm vegan. I've been vegan for 5 years. She was like, oh, well, it must be your weight then. No tests, no nothing. And I actually left thanking her. And the amount of medical professionals that do gaslight you, that do just say, oh, just try harder, or just, you know, it's in your head, or we don't know what's wrong with you. It's maddening. It took me years of fighting and searching and begging medical professionals to help. I was constantly told, we don't know what's wrong with you. Just try harder. And attitudes from people around me were just as poor. Just push through, even though pushing through meant I'd be bedbound for days, sometimes weeks. I am mostly housebound, so it feels weird to be outside of the house right now. But a lot of people can't leave their houses at all. I truly believe that if I was unwell, doctors would help me. But now, as someone with chronic illness and disabilities, I know that's absolutely not the case 99% of the time. And if it wasn't for services like Emerge's nurse service, I wouldn't have the answers I do. And now I know how common medical gaslighting is. I know how common medical misogyny is. I know how common fat phobia is. And I know how much harder it is for people who have multiple levels of marginalization, people who are from culturally and racially marginalized backgrounds. Instantly, it's so much harder to be believed and get a diagnosis. And 2/3 of women in healthcare have actually experienced gender bias. And I suspect there's actually a lot more of us with chronic illnesses and ME and associated conditions, but we just can't get the answers because doctors just don't know. And even those of us who do have answers don't have adequate support. And our support systems aren't set up for people like us. People with invisible and dynamic disabilities, people with chronic illnesses, people with ME and all the other conditions that are similar. Whether it's ME, whether it's long COVID, whether it's fibromyalgia or some other kind of energy limiting condition, I don't think people realize how bad it can get. That you can be literally too tired to function. And an example I like to use is often I am too tired to figure out how to charge my phone. And I know that might sound so silly, but don't you just plug it in? Yeah, you plug it in and you plug it into the wall, and that's too much for my brain to work out when I'm tired. Even speaking is too much. And I'm one of those people that actually doesn't have a lot of support around. And if it wasn't for the NDIS, I don't know that I would be surviving, because before the NDIS, I couldn't cook, I couldn't clean. I ate dry noodles because there was nothing else I could eat. I couldn't stand up to even cook them. I couldn't work. I couldn't apply for these support systems because I was too tired and there was so much paperwork. I ended up having to leave my job and spend my entire life savings on trying to find out what was happening to my body and trying to get enough evidence to get support. And after all that, NDIS does not recognize most of my conditions. They only recognize that I'm autistic. So, for example, I can't even get a ramp into my house, even though I'm in a wheelchair. But that's just an example of how these systems were not designed for us. NDIS and DSP and Medicare, there's so much burden, there's so much medical admin. It's exhausting. It's exhausting to just exist with this, let alone trying to navigate the system. And there's often this perception that we're making it up, that it can't be that bad, that you're just sitting around all day and that sounds nice, when it is really, really, really not that. It's having to give up your job because you're too tired. It's never being able to make your favorite meals how you like them because you just can't do that anymore. And I like to explain it as a phone charger that never gets beyond maybe like 10% battery. You're always in that low power mode. And for some people, that might be like 1%. And it depends on the day because we have dynamic conditions. Emmy is staying at home, it's cancelling plans, it's missing out on things, it's being too sick to function, it's seeing people around you live their lives and not being able to do that and thinking, damn, if I just had the energy. And you might see us when we are at our best advocating, maybe when we're going to the doctors or at an event like this, you might see us and think, oh, you don't look sick. But you don't see what happens to us after. As other speakers have said, this will take a huge toll on us all. Personally, after my other event a couple of days ago, it took me 2 days of just being in a dark room, sleeping, literally sending an email was too much. So it costs a lot. And it costs a lot to keep fighting and to keep advocating because we have to do that at every single facet, whether it's the healthcare system, whether it's support systems. And people are struggling to exist. And I'm someone that only has mild ME. So people that have severe and very severe that are too unwell to largely advocate, it's so much worse for them. I personally have friends that have gotten together and are trying to advocate for friends who don't have the funds they need to exist, and they're genuinely afraid their friend will die. I also have a friend that went to the emergency room and the doctors treated them like scum between their toes. And I want to share a quote from that medical gaslighting story just because I think it's quite relevant. The scariest thing was not that I thought they were going to let me die. The scariest part was not knowing how long they would leave me until they intervened. That is what one of my friends who went to the emergency room had for their doctors. People can't exist, people can't eat, and there's so many of us that do not have any support. And if that's not a sign that we need to change, I don't know what is. We need change, we need research, we need lived experience to lead the way. We need better systems that aren't inaccessible. And it shouldn't be a system that's based on a diagnosis because it's so hard to get a diagnosis. It's so expensive. It's so inaccessible. And as we've heard, telehealth, you have to be able to get there once a year or see them in person. And so many of us cannot do that. And that's so discriminatory. I don't understand why that is a thing when we proved in COVID that, telehealth is good. There are so many things that need to change. And even when we're in situations where we're asked for our lived experience, these healthcare systems and support systems still don't listen to us. I know I've gone over my time, but I just wanted to quickly share an example of a group that is supposed to help for this. And again, they prescribed graded exercise therapy. And they were wondering, oh, why are you getting sicker? And I was like, well, probably because post-exertional malaise and all these other things. And it was just completely ignored. And that's when you're literally hired for your opinion. So if there's one thing I could ask, it was that people listen to us, that people recognize how difficult it is, that we can help make some of these challenges a bit easier. Because there are so many barriers and it's so exhausting to jump through these hoops all the time, being disabled and chronically ill and medical admin and then facing so-called experts that are making us sicker. We just aren't heard. The system wasn't built for us, but I urge people listening today to help us fix it, to listen to lived experience, because we are the experts. And to recognize that health is fragile. You can become disabled or chronically ill at any time in your life. And then you'll be grateful that people like us have advocated and supported. Thank you to everyone who is here, and thank you to everyone who is too unwell to be here. We see you even if we don't see you.
Thank you, Zoe. What a powerful presentation. And there were so many things in your presentation that you reminded us of, not the least of which is some of the struggles around the NDIS. And whilst we've had some wins for some of our patients that contact us whom we help to navigate the system, we've had so many instances where someone who's been as disabled and as unwell as you has requested a wheelchair. And it's been denied because their condition wasn't deemed to be permanent, or because they hadn't exhausted all the therapies, one of which, of course, was graded exercise therapy, so, or even cognitive behavioural therapy. And these things are used almost against patients, preventing them from getting the access that they need to supports in order to live their lives. So thank you of reminding us of all of those messages, and thank you for the effort that you made to be here. We knew when we asked you to come, Zoe's come from Melbourne, and, we just are really appreciative of you making that huge physical effort. And to everyone who's made that effort to be here today in person, we recognise that the next days, weeks, months will be difficult as a result of the effort that you've made, and we salute you. So I'm going to be handing over in a moment to Emerge Australia's chair, Mark Clisby, but I'll just sum up. We've had compelling stories and evidence today demonstrating why Australia must move from stigma to science and from silence to meaningful change, as our Chief Medical Officer reminded us today. We do seek expanded investment in clinical education for GPs and all health professionals, expansion of support services for people with ME/CFS, absolutely critical, fair access to the NDIS and disability supports, and dedicated ME/CFS research funding as part of a national ME/CFS research strategy and plan. And we really urge our government and our members of parliament, some of whom were here today, to heed these priorities and take them on board. We don't ask for a lot of money, but this money is going to really change the lives of people with ME/CFS, and it will confirm that the Albanese government sees you, hears you, understands you, and wants to help you. So that's our impassioned plea to you today. Expanded investment in these priorities will not only improve health outcomes, it will restore and instill hope, dignity, and recognition to Australians who've waited far too long to be seen and believed. I can't believe that patients have had to wait so long for recognition. Thank you all for being part of this event today. Thank you all for helping us trying to move the needle from stigma to science and educating for change. We really appreciate your support, and we believe that together we can make a difference and we can create that change, and together we are stronger. And now I'm going to leave. You've heard enough from me. I'm delighted to hand over to Emerge Australia's Chair, Mark Clisby, to close the forum today and say a few words. Before I do that, I want to acknowledge my team. I told you I get emotional. My team who are here today: Jane Sydenham-Clark, Dr. Michelle Tavaletti, Sarah Brown, Dr. Rochelle Lade back in Melbourne, Dr. Jessica Cowhausen, Simone Isons, and all the team, Kate Herbert, Laura Allard, Camille Williams. We've got a small dedicated team. They're monitoring social media back there. Thank you to all of you, because you make these things happen. So I'll hand over to Mark Clisby.
Thanks, Anne. And thanks for the opportunity to work for my supper. If anybody can see my notes, it has been a bit of work to give some reflections on today, which is what Anne asked me to do. Firstly, thanks to the 200 people that are watching. I reflect that there are 2,000 times that number that are relying on what we're collectively doing, and that's why events like this are so important. And I want to thank all of you on behalf of Emerge Australia and our ME and long COVID communities for your attendance, and especially to those of you who have made such valuable contributions. I have three broad reflections. The first is the importance of embedding lived experience and lived expertise into all that we do. If we ever needed an illustration of the need for this, then today's speakers have definitely provided it. We heard the direct voices of the people we partner with and serve, and whose lived expertise is critical to all that we do collectively. We heard your messages, the burden of ME/CFS and the importance of clinical education, the challenges in getting health professional support, the need for a national research strategy. Along the way, I was reminded of something my son said to me a few years ago, which is, there are two journeys, Dad. One is to diagnosis, and Penelope Macmillan told us that averages 5.9 years. And the second journey is from the diagnosis. And what we need to be on about is reducing the duration of that first journey. 5.9 is a mean, which means there are people way longer than that, as we heard today. It's not good enough. My second reflection is something dear to my heart, and that is, I was reminded of the critical importance of directed and high quality research and its translation into clinical care, its importance to a country's health and well-being. And so together, my first two reflections, embedding lived experience and expertise and directed and high quality research, really form the evidence base from which all policy decisions, clinical interventions and funding follows. I'll keep reminding myself of that. My third broad reflection is that there's clearly space for Australia on the world stage to do what we do well, to innovate, to take the ideas of others, to decide as a nation what we're going to focus on, and to turn these priorities into successful health and public policy interventions. We can do this. Given our size, we don't have to be experts or the best or the leaders in all the things, but we need to show leadership in how we, for example, learn from global research findings, consider and disseminate these, even as with the National Clearinghouse, prioritise our research and clinical responses to not just biomedical research, but research in other fields of relevance to ME and long COVID, how we embed lived expertise in all that we do, how we build programs that are world-class, and how we fund this work. We heard that we've got a lot of the scaffolding on the way or in place for these things, but today has highlighted again that these scaffolding elements, particularly the funding side of it, need to be got right. Funding's, again, I was reminded, funding needs to be proportionate to the burden of disease endured across the Australian community, noting, like other health issues, it's hidden in many parts and groups of the community who are traditionally not well served by the health system. A couple of things that I want to highlight that particularly struck me along the way. Lily Schubert speaking about the hundreds of interventions and fighting for her care. Professor Kidd saying that he acknowledged the need for change. Tracy Collins, 400 people going to 2,000 doctors, average of 6 types each, and the importance of the NDIS. Dr. Freelander apologising for those things not yet implemented and noting, as we know, that Emerge and Anne have worked above and beyond to make things better. Jordan Stiljohn commenting on the relentlessness of the community in prosecuting our case through advocacy. Bernard Shuey, ME/CFS is a well-recognised medical condition that can and must be managed. The carers' eyes, that really got me. And it's true. A step at a time, a day at a time, and that it's lonely as a carer. They never mentioned the cost. The costs are huge. 5.9 years as a mean, all those appointments, all that cost. Penelope Macmillan, Craig Pickering's AI pick really got me. And Penelope advocated for home-based care and telehealth care to reduce the burden through better primary health care. And Zoe, the fatigue struggle of chronic illness struck a chord with me. So they were some of the things that I reflect on. I hope you find those useful. You'll have your own thoughts as well. I was particularly finally struck, Anne, with what you said, and it's true. The dialogue, the narrative, and the language does seem to have changed, and that's such a positive thing. So finally, I would like to thank Anne and the team for organising the event, all of you who have presented today, the parliamentarians who have signed on to this Friends group. That's the only way of getting one, and to particularly thank our two co-chairs for their leadership, the House staff who facilitated the meeting and the audio visuals, thank you, and to all of you who have attended the meeting, and finally to thank those of you who have lived with ME/CFS for sharing your stories, which have particularly moved us in the audience. So I think I close it, but we need to make sure we get a photo.
That's right.
Yeah. So thank you all. I officially close the event, which I think has been successful, and I'm very happy to be able to do so. So thank you. And now we need a photo.
Yes, I just am going to ask Jane Sydenham-Clark to come up. She's just got some instructions regarding a photo. And you know what they say, when you try to thank people, you always leave someone out. And I just want to make a big shout out to Laura Cool, Emerge Australia's operations manager, who works tirelessly for us and is monitoring social media and writing posts as we speak. Laura, you know that I wouldn't ever leave you out, but it just skipped my mind. I'm really sorry, but thank you, Laura, for everything you do for us.